This game slaps. Let's go.
Hey, it's Chris. What do we got going on today? We have Studio Midhall's new expansion 2, Beast, Shattered Isles. What do you need to know? Is this right for you? Is this going to change your mind? One versus all. Monster versus hunters. Over 3 days and nights. Who comes out on top depending on how smart you are. Now, it's going to add more, but it's also going to add it in a slightly different way. Is it going to change your mind? Is this going to be the thing that makes you want to get it or not? Well, let's talk about it. Let's go. So if you're getting into Beast right now, if you're looking at this and going, what do I need to know to figure out whether or not even the game itself is right for me? Let's talk about it just in a brief nutshell. Beast, you are one beast, one player versus multiple hunters. 2 or 3 opponents depending on how many players. What do you need to know about this game? Well, if you take on the hunters, you are going to be gradually exploring this land, trying to figure out through the use of trails and clues where the monster is in the first place. Now, this is where the asymmetry comes in because the hunters will all be asymmetric, the beasts are all asymmetric, and the beast starts out hidden. As you progress through the game, gathering clues, resources, and even kills, you slowly determine who's the hunter and who's actually the prey in this game. It's an action system based on cards through a day-night cycle. Essentially what you're doing here is you have a large set of cards, 16 action cards in the base game, and I have an additional 4 here with just the small portion of the expansion that I have. Now again, these are all unique cards. So what you have going on here is a whole menagerie of ways that you're going to be interacting. And these cards are made up of several different things that you need to know. So first off, on your turn in this sense, you're going to be having to choose how many cards you want to play. You're going to have access to talents, items, as well as the action cards that I just mentioned. And you have to, or you can play as many as you want, but at some point you will be passing, and that's where the dynamic nature of this game comes in. It's sort of a chicken. You do want to run out first. You don't want to run out first. Who's going to have the last action, the last laugh? So let's talk about these action cards here for a second. So for this one, for example, what you're doing on your turn is you have the ability to play up to 2 of these action cards. In the middle of the card, you'll notice that there is a gray and a blue area. That gray and that blue area could also be red. Now you have the option to play 1 blue and 1 red on a single turn. And then you can't play anything else of these action cards because you may have more than just the 2 in your original hand. If you are the hunters, you'd be playing the top part of the card. If you are the beasts, you're going to be playing the bottom of the card. And this is where it comes a little bit fancy. And this is where it also gets a little bit tricky. This is one of the more divisive elements of this game. It's also the way to mitigate a lot of chaos that people may not like in the first place. You draft these cards. Yeah, you draft. So you might hate draft. You might love draft. You might just worry about what you've got going on. Now, the tricky part, again, with that is it's going to depend on the number of players, how many of these action cards you get. Because therein lies also the other dilemma. This game, although it plays 2, you need to know that if you are playing 2-player this game, one person will be the monster, the other person has to manage 2 hunters. If you're playing with 3 people, each person gets a hunter, and then the other person gets a monster. And with 4 people, obviously 1 versus 3. And then comes in the fun. Then you go back and forth until the round ends. Now, like I mentioned, all of these monsters are asymmetric. All of the action cards are asymmetric that I just showed you. The monsters, as well as the hunters, also have their own asymmetric abilities here that are going to be unique to them as well, as you can see here. They all come with a few set of abilities that they're going to have access to that are going to give them just one-time use special cards, if you will. And you can see that if we flip them over, it kind of just runs you through, again, what they are, but also what portion of the map they can play in. Because not only do these cards have the blue or the red in the middle, they also have a symbol. And that symbol lines up with the symbols on the map in terms of the areas that are going to be slightly color-coded or area-coded in that sense. Now you'll notice that, say, I have a hunter in this area, but there are also lots of creatures on the board as well. So what you're going to be doing is also taking out these creatures. You actually, as weird as this game sounds, don't actually necessarily want to fight the hunters. You want to pick and nip at their heels and pick off the animals around the edges so that you can build up your resources, your abilities, so when you finally have to go head to head in order to complete the win conditions, you're a lot stronger in order to do so. Because that's the other dynamic of this game you have to realize. Like almost every other one versus all game I've played, the balance is not heavily, but it's always skewed towards the hunters. It's always skewed towards the more. If you have more experience with this game, you need to be the beast. If you have more experience with any of these one versus all games, you are inevitably to make the game as balanced as possible on the one side, not the all side. And depending on how you feel about that, that's going to create sort of a meta, if you will. How okay are you being the one all the time, right? Like as someone, as myself, as the person who owns the games, plays the games, teaches the games, I am almost inevitably always the one. I have no problem with that. How do you feel about that if you're going to buy this game? Because invariably, if you're teaching someone else, you're going to have to be the beast, because the beast is the more complicated, the more nuanced, the more strategic, harder side of things overall, period. Does that matter to you? Now, I won't lie, these new monsters do not take that away. They do not alleviate that burden whatsoever, at least the 3 that I have right here. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I say that as a disclaimer. You need to know what you're getting into. Now, I will also say with all 3 of these monsters, which I'll show you briefly in a second, what they're newly bringing to the game, that they're still also cool. Because the other thing you worry about a game like this, right, it's getting an expansion that's getting more. Is it getting too much? Is it overwhelming in the complexity, right? Because there's certain aspects, obviously, that you can address with an expansion, certain critiques, certain criticisms of games in terms of balance, in terms of enough asymmetry, enough of uniqueness. But you also worry about layering on this much rules in addition. Now, this does not layer a whole lot of rules actually whatsoever. The rulebook right now, as a prototype copy, is relatively overhead light. But there are a few keywords that each of these monsters have that are going to be, unique to them that you're going to have to learn. And again, that goes to the learning curve. If you know how this game plays and the dynamics in the first place, you're going to be better off suited for the monsters. The hunters are more straightforward. Hack, slash, find, kill. Right? A little bit less strategy, more tactics. The monster is strategically heavier, period. Because, the great thing about this rulebook in the first place says that, here's some tips, because otherwise you're going to screw this up, or it's going to be completely unbalanced one way or the other. Like a lot of one versus all games, if that experience level is dynamically different from the get-go. And that's okay. But again, know what you need to know before going in. Now, how is the hidden movement done? And this is probably the biggest criticism, right? This is probably the biggest divisive element that I've seen, because people seem to either love it or hate it in terms of this game as a whole. You have these hidden movement cards, and you're going to be laying them down. So when you're the beast, essentially what you do, you draw these cards, and then you play them, but you don't know where they are going on the map as the hunters. Now, there's a little side mini map you can keep track of if you really are spatially averse like me, but otherwise you're going to be laying them along the side of the board here, and you're going to be able to keep track that way. And so as the hunters pass over where their tracks are, you have to expose where the tracks are until they can find you and utilize that deduction. And that is the most divisive element, because unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about this, people are focused on this game as being a hidden movement game. And yes, it's marketed as a hidden movement game, but I'll make the argument that the hidden movement is only a fraction of this game. The tactical nature of it, the strategic of picking things off, being very sly, being very obtuse as the monster is really the mainstay, rather than the hidden portion of things, because you are exposed all the time, or at least I am, right? And so that's more of the thing that you're having to deal with on a constant basis. The other thing that you'll be dealing with as you kill, as you complete contracts, and we'll talk about that in a second with this game, because the scenarios in this game are given as contracts, if you will. Contracts here give you scenario setups, they give you player counts that this one's suitable for, and then they give you how you're going to be changing it dynamically in the game. And so these contracts, on the days or nights, if you fulfill these objectives, you get additional things called grudge, which is basically your currency to upgrade your monsters in the first place with these numbers next to these abilities. The darker, the reddish here, are permanent upgrades. If you have green ones, they're instant one-time uses. And all of these have little minions down here as the beast, allowing you to sort of scatter your minions to the wind, allowing them to pick off again how you want to do so. And then they also will have additional ways that you can sort of, again, experiment or find the right monster for you if you're the beast. All of the creatures on the board that you can see here, they all have different values of how much life they have, how many hits they take, or their reward for being knocked out. Hunters do not get knocked out. Hunters respawn. So again, this game is less about smash, smash, kill, kill, and more about the strategy behind when you're choosing to do so, either as the hunter or especially as the beast. So there are two new elements on this board in particular that this new expansion is giving you. Again, giving it just enough, but not too much. One, ruins. You can see over here, we have a little bit of a different shape around the outside of this particular area. And that corresponds to, if you can control it essentially at the beginning of your turn, you have to pass. And so passing is your whole turn, and then it goes to the other side, right? But if you control it, each of the contracts here has a different reward that you get when you control it on your turn. Okay, there's a couple of those, 3 in this case, on each of these maps. The other aspect of things is you can see we've sort of got the Ticket to Ride-esque vibe going on, right? All of a sudden, we've got these loops around the outside here. We've got this loop around the outside here. You've got the loop outside down here. And those are hidden paths that can be opened up and utilized all of a sudden, which is frankly a nicely needed thing, especially for the beast. Because I'll say, as someone who has a few games under their belt, the beast's biggest weakness is the inability to move fast or away, as opposed to the hunters sometimes, which are able to cover much larger spreads of the land in the first place, which is, where the minions often help out as well. But having that little thing there as an address to the criticism of that aspect in the first place is a nice touch without adding, again, a whole lot of complexity or, overhead. So you're probably wondering what some actual details are, Chris, besides the new stuff there. Well, I've got the 3 monsters and the 3 hunters here, and let me show you a little bit about them, just give you a brief overview here. So first up, we have Reborn. Now this one is the trickiest one of them all. They actually say only if you're a pro at this game, this is what you need to do, because essentially on the other side, you have the Unborn. What happens with this one is you actually start off as like this little shade that's really weak, and you have to kill animals. And if you kill animals, you unlock the superpower Schwarzenegger on the other side. You have to be able to stay alive long enough in order to get to this. And that's where the dynamic of these two different sides is unique in and of itself. The second one here is Valkyr. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to actually having special tiles that go down here that will activate your cards, because some of the cards will also have double abilities. And we'll talk about that in a second. That is one other new element of this game. And as you take them off, you power them up, but it also cloaks you. So if you lose all the tokens down here, then you become revealed automatically and you lay them on the board, but you can gather them back up when you kill things, or your minions kill things, or if you choose to reveal yourself instead, you gather them all back up quickly and then can slowly get hidden again. So then last up, you have Marduk, who has the other new keyword here, Outburst. And then it's basically move a step, kick a hunter or animal on your location. So you can kick them away. And so you can get a little bit more space created differently in that sense. The other thing that we didn't talk about, though, as I just mentioned, in these cards, there are new actions with these action cards, because now, before, like I said, you could only use it for one or the other, right? Let me show you something different, though. Now, with these cards here, you'll notice that here, for example, with this monster, you actually have a blue down here and a red up here, which means in this case, if you use this as the red up here, you can actually, and again, it has a requirement there, but you can actually do both of your actions with this card that powers this one up. Storm, regular just an attack, but then Storm deals 1 additional damage and transform nearby location. And so you can power these up. You're going to notice that the majority of them don't have that, but the ones that do are going to be extra powerful. Now, nothing has changed from the open market. You're going to have the ability to get items or beastly talents on a turn-by-turn basis, paying for them or utilizing them to the greatest extent as a one-off situation in most cases, or essentially upgrades for your hunters as you become stronger like the beast does. But the challenge here again is balance. And so that's going to be the big thing. If you're going to add more to these, how do you avoid the power creep as well? You just got to stay adjacent. And so far, from what I've played with the new stuff here, I like the new stuff. It's just doing things differently. It's not adding a whole lot of, wow, this is completely out there. Wow, I'm having to go through all the steps. Wow, the rules for, this character are this long versus the base game of this, right? We've all seen that in games. And this doesn't do that. That gets away from that trope in the first place, which is nice. Now, again, 3 of each, but we'll see. The heroes themselves, again, are doing something slightly different overall. We've got a Flameblade Huntress here. She just moves really far, does more damage because she's got a flaming sword, right? Then you've got the Captain, who basically gets to react and take additional moves or move in reaction or do turns or actions in reaction to the monsters and the beasts themselves, which really gives you a lot more flexibility in what you're doing. Then you also have Eivind, the Sky Hunter. She has a familiar that allows you to fly back and forth or move other people back and forth, again, covering the gaps on the board itself much easier. Freaking awesome. So that being said, the last thing that you need to know, I've only got one of these. This is the big, probably other criticism that the base game gets, right? You have essentially these scenarios that are mix and matchable with whatever hunters or whatever enemies that you want to use as the beast, and they're contracts, and they basically set the stage. And I've only got one in the prototype here, but they've also allowed people to custom create, and not only custom create fan content for the base game, but they're also doing a couple ones for actually a contest for the game in the first place. And so seeing more of this, again, is going to give just more modularity. But, you know, who is this game for? Let's talk about that for a second. This game is for a meta-evolving, replaying crowd. If you don't like one versus all, this isn't going to change your mind. If you're looking for a purely deductive, more heavy on the deducing, more heavy on the hidden side of things, this is not your game. This is not your game. I have no problem saying that. It has those elements. It's being marketed as those aspects, and it has those aspects. There's nothing, you know, not clear about having those aspects, but it is not the mainstay focus of it. It's the strategy, it's the asymmetric upgrades, it's the utilization of those talents, weapons, abilities, strikes, and the briefities of the popping out from the hiding, being out and getting back in to the hidden groves. If you're looking for that, go look elsewhere. Go look for mind management. Go look for, one of the Fowler games like Fugitive. Go that route. That's going to be more along those lines. But if you want more of a chaotic, non-Euro experience with this, now again, no dice, but still a little bit chaotic in the sense that there's a lot going on. The board state is going to change significantly as you're maneuvering, as you're moving your, now again, newly acrylic standees, right? As opposed to any miniatures or cardboard. That's going to be an option here. Again, team standee, right? Liege. That's what you need to be aware of. There is a lot of board state that you're having to deal with. The movement is there. It's feinting. It's double backing. It's, again, just trying to escape. And you know what? Sometimes you're just going to get screwed. Sometimes the other team is just going to be better than you, especially if they're the hunters and they're just going up against you and you're not doing as well that time. And that's bound to happen with a game like this. If you don't like that, if you don't like that sort of experience, this expansion isn't going to change your mind, folks. This expansion is just going to give you slight nuances, slight ways to address the criticisms of the mechanical approach that it took in the first game time around, and try and lessen some of the blow of those in the first place. But it's not going to give you a different experience. It isn't going to fix things and make things completely different. That's okay. This is still a great game. But like I said, this is also not a great game for everyone. And that's what you have to realize at the same time. Pros, the asymmetry kills it. Hunters, beasts, give me more contracts. I worry always about these games with the balance of them. I worry less about the hunters and the beasts and more about some of the beastly talents and the item upgrade cards, because those are the additional stuff that just throws a complete curveball sometimes into the situation. And obviously, if the market is variable and you're shuffling that, if the beast gets better ones or the hunters get better ones, that can skew things and you might not like that. But it gives a wild, chaotic approach to things in the first place, and I enjoy that as well. The hidden movement side of things, it's lesser. That's okay. Like I said, if you want more, go elsewhere. But it's still a complete experience utilizing that mechanism. The other thing I like about some of these other monsters is, again, just a little bit easier to do damage. Damage on the hunter side versus the monster side is a difficult spreadsheet of calculations. Can't make it too easy to kill the animals. Can't make it too easy to kill the beast, because again, health is 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s for the most part, or less in all of these situations. So when you've got that fine of a line you're throwing and treading all the time, it really has to be done well. And personally speaking, I really like the base game with that. I really like this expansion. It doesn't take away any of that. I still am very happy with it. But again, if that's not what you're looking for as a whole, it's okay. Go elsewhere. Look, this game is going to be freaking highly, highly group dependent. And if you don't have the group to support this, it doesn't matter how good a game is, and this one is true to that. So you don't go in thinking you can fix your girlfriend or your boyfriend, because there are some things you just can't fix. This is also one of those things. You can't fix the group that ain't gonna like it in the first place. You buy something else. But if you do, again, it slaps. And I mean that in a good way. And it slaps hard. Is this expansion or expansion content essential? I'm going to make the argument that no, but it's going to be a slight upgrade. It's more, stay with me with this comparison here, more like Spirit Island and say one of the expansions there, because it adds a little bit more complexity in terms of the monsters and just slight more complexity and differences nuance-wise in the hunters. And it gives you a larger pool of the action cards as a whole. But it does not change the dynamics of the game in the first place whatsoever. And that's very similar to what Spirit Island does as well. If you don't like the base game of Spirit Island, Jagged Earth, Nature Incarnate, Flame and Feathers are never going to change your feelings of the base game, right? My wife hates Spirit Island. None of those expansions are going to change her overall disdain for the mechanical approach to that game in the first place. This is the same, but it's going to, for people that really like it, give them an option to not only have more variability, but to find, as we do with many asymmetric games, like I was just talking about Mythic Mischief the other week, find the faction, find the beast, find the set of hunters that you prefer. And that maybe the person across from you is going to have a completely different set when they play next time. That's what this game brings. That's what this expansion content is bringing so far based on what I have here. And again, if you get me more of the contracts as well, that's really where it hits home and definitely could use more of in the first place. So there you go. My thoughts on Beast Shattered Isles. Game found. Go check it out. Is it right for you? Wrong for you? Everything you need to know right there. Let me know comments, questions, or concerns down below. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Subscribe if you made it this far somehow. Peace out.